All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining me today for this form building webinar. My name is Nick and I'll be walking us through the builder today. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, we will be opening up that chat toward the end of the webinar. So please hold on to those questions and I will be opening up that chat and be happy to answer anything that I can prior to us closing up, or if I need to go back over any information, I'm more than happy to do so as well. Today we'll be talking about the selection option widgets, just in a little bit more detail than we did in our previous webinar. We'll be talking a little bit on how to autofill selections made in those widgets, as well as using them for conditional forms. So as always, we'll be working off of our FormDr training packet. So we'll click those three dots and go into Edit Forms. We'll add ourselves a new Scratch tab as we were working off of this other one in our previous webinar. So we'll go ahead and leave that because we can use that for some demonstration. So we'll just go ahead and go next to build since we have our tabs set to where we need. We can look at the form that we created in our previous webinar when we went over the selection option widgets. And today we will be again talking about those widgets in more advanced situations and in more detail. All right, we have our Scratch tab added. As always, the Scratch tab does come with a patient name widget by default. I touch on this in just about every video, but I do feel it's very important that the patient name widget will be needed at least once in each packet, and it will also need to be used only with the person whose information you're trying to collect or store that submission under. The name that's filled out in the patient name widget in the first and last name fields, that's the name that submission will be logged under in the send and receive page. Okay. So we'll go ahead and add a selection or single select option widget. This is going to be used for your typical yes or no question, anything that will force the patient to select a single answer. You can add other options, answer selections here if you like, as many as you need. However, I typically recommend if you go over 3 answer selections that you just turn that into a drop-down instead. So if we were to have, 4 or 5 answers, whatever the case may be, but we'll just add 4 to keep these the same. And if you ever do create a section and it's not looking the way that you would like, or if you would like, for instance, if you had a section full of the single select options and you wanted them to be drop downs instead, you don't have to rebuild those sections. You can always just come in here, open up that single select option, and then go to that field type drop down. From that field type dropdown, you'll be able to change this widget into a dropdown or one of the multiple selection option widgets as well. So we could just turn that right into a dropdown and we're good to go there. So that'll just save you time when it comes to building these out. Okay, but the main goal in today's video is going to show you how to create a conditional form, and that could be useful in terms of having one packet that can display basically 2 separate versions of that same packet. So maybe you have extra forms that you need signed or extra information that you need to collect based on if the patient is a minor or not, or if they are a male or female, or whatever the case may be. You will be able to build out both of those forms in the same widget and have that one qualifying question at the beginning, ask that question, and then present them with the appropriate information. So just to demonstrate that, we'll go down and we'll remove the extra options, and we'll change this back to a single select option just to show you that you can do this, or you will be able to use this with multiple widgets. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to change the answer selections. Oh, we need to get rid of these as well. And so as long as they have the same amount of selections going up to that amount, obviously you won't be able to autofill a selection made that isn't in the other widget. But we have two options in both of these, and what we're going to do is just make it simple. We'll just make them both drop downs right now, and we'll make them both the same, option 1 and option 2, just to mirror the answer selections here. And we'll leave the titles different just so we can tell that they are two different widgets. But what we're going to do here is talk about autofilling the selection options. And all that you'll need to do is just understand how to autofill in general. And basically all you're going to want to do is just duplicate this shortcode, this randomized shortcode of letters that you can find in the name field right underneath the title. We're just going to need to copy and paste this into the second dropdown. That will make them both act as the same element, and then when one of them is selected, that same answer choice will be selected for the second as well. So let's just go ahead and do that. We'll copy and paste that name into our other dropdown in that same section. And now let's go to the style page. The style page is a really good way to test forms because it does act as a live preview of the form. So if we do have any conditional information or any auto-filled information, you will be able to see that. We need to actually change the... We'll just start fresh so I don't have to change all this over and over again. All right. Next to style. And now whenever one is selected, the other will be selected as well. So these will now act as the same widget, and we can have these on multiple tabs throughout the packet to provide the patient with different sets of information based on a single selection made on the first page. So what we can do is go back to add, and I'll just demonstrate this with another scratch tab. We'll just title it tab 3 just to save time. And we're going to move our second drop down to that tab. And we're going to use the move function for this. If you are moving single widgets around tabs, or if you are moving an entire column of information, or if that information is in a group widget, whatever the case may be, you can just open up that column or for that specific widget and then use that move function at the bottom. It will allow you to select a tab to move it to, and it will move it once you click that move button to the bottom of that tab. All right. Okay, so we have our third tab here with our drop down. We have our drop down on tab 2, and we have drop down on tab 1. Now, what we're going to do is use our sex question just to demonstrate for this one. All right. And then we'll have different sets of information based on that selection. So we can put our marital status question that we created in the last webinar, and then we'll put our multiple checkboxes in the female conditional information. So now, depending on what answer is selected, they'll be presented with more information to fill out, and we'll just keep them both like this so that we can see that those will be displayed differently. We can go ahead and use the rest though. So let's go ahead and take our review of systems. We'll put it in that column just to move everything together. We'll move that over to our second page. And all I'm doing here is going to show that you can have the different sets of information displayed. I'm just moving things around now. This does not. This is not necessarily part of the demonstration of the selection option widgets, but here we go. All right, now based on, we got to mirror those as well. All right, now one thing that you'll have to make sure of is that the name is mirrored or copied and pasted into those other widgets, as well as the value. The value will need to be the same for each of those selections as well. So if one of these has, was started out as a single select option, these will be true and false instead, and each one added after that would be, option 3, 4, 5. But the drop-downs will always start out as option 1 and option 2 for those values. So you'll just need to make sure that those match up as well. But we can go over to that style page. And now on our first tab, the patient will select whether they're male or female. They'll be presented with the appropriate information for a male on that page. And then on the second option, or the second tab, we can have that same drop down with the same information, but present different information. So maybe this is the medical history section. And then if you don't want to include the female only questions, for a male patient, we can have the same set of information in both answer selections, just one of them providing extra information. So maybe this is, female only. And then what we can do is we'll duplicate our review of systems so that regardless of that selection, they will be presented with that information. So whether they're male or female, let's make this all match up just so that we can see what it would look like in a real setting. All right, back to the style page, and we'll go back to that first tab. And so now we can select that male selection. We'll get that review of systems on that history tab. And option 1 is also selected for our third tab. So if we were to have a consent form, that might be different depending on that selection. We could have those two sets of information. So you can essentially have two different packets in one packet just based off of a selection made by the patient. If we go back and we select female, or if we even select female from this one as well, again, these will all be acting as the same widget. So even if we were to select it from the last tab, we can go ahead and select that option 2, which is our female option for the other two. Then we'll be presented with that review of systems on our history page, but we'll also get that female questionnaire as well. So this could just make things easier and also make things a little bit easier on the patient when they're filling out the form as well, just so that they're not presented with any information that is not relevant to them. And you can do this throughout each tab throughout the packet. Again, just including the same information that you would need from a patient regardless of their selection, and then the additional information as well. I do see this most commonly with forms for minors. So that question would be the qualifier on the first page. Is this patient a minor? Yes or no. If they are a minor, then we would have all of their information that would need to be collected on that form, as well as a parental consent or anything else that you might need from their guardian. All right. And the same can be done with the multiple selections as well. However, most of the time in these types of situations when you're going to be using this, it's going to be a question more appropriate for a single selection to be made. However, you can also utilize the multiple checkboxes and the multi-select options for this functionality as well. Another thing that you can do is use these with the calculation tool. We do have another video that goes over the rating scale and the calculation tool. However, I would like to point out that you can use that functionality with the drop-downs as well. Maybe we won't use the sex question for this just because it's not going to make much sense, but we'll have another one. Maybe this is just a drop-down, a series of questions with, let's say, 3 options. Yes, no, don't know. And we'll make don't know the value of 0, no, 1, and yes, 2. So now what we've done is we've set a value for these answer selections. And we're going to calculate that value into our calculation. The value can be whatever you need it to be. Just know that the output is going to be that value based on the selection that is being made. And we're going to use that calculation. We're going to use that shortcode again here. We're going to copy and paste that into our calculation tool into a pair of brackets. So once a selection has been made, this calculation tool will now populate with whatever value has been set to that answer selection. we can go ahead and add another one of these. We'll go ahead and add a second one. Duplicating this will duplicate the answer choices as well as the values that have been set. So you can duplicate this question many times as you need for that section, and it will keep all of the value and the answer selections the same. It will also duplicate that title. So if the titles are going to be different for each question, just remember to change those. But each added element will generate a brand new unused shortcode that's not being used anywhere else in the form. This will just prevent any unwanted auto population from happening. And so we can just copy and paste that shortcode as well. And we can have another set of brackets separated by a plus sign. And now this will just add these two fields together once they've been selected. The calculation tool will calculate any valid mathematical expression. Just know that the brackets, if your calculation does have brackets, I would recommend setting up a second calculation tool to just calculate whatever expression is in those brackets, because the system will read anything within a set of brackets that is as a shortcode for a widget. So you may need to get a little creative, but as long as your math is correct, the calculation tool can get that done. So let's go next to style, and we can now see this work right here on the style page. So that yes answer is worth 2. Once it's selected, it will add it to that calculation tool. Our don't know is worth 0, and our no is worth 1. So we can see that number will update each time that that a selection has been made that is within that calculation expression. All right, but the calculation tool can be used with any widget that has a value. So that will be the drop-down widget, the single select option, and you can also use this with the multi-select option and the checkbox options as well. Any section that will have a value option will be able to apply that to the calculation. Just remember that when you're copying and pasting those shortcodes into the calculation, or if you're copying and pasting a shortcode of a selection option widget into another selection option widget to autofill that selection, just remember it's not going to be the values only that you need to copy over. It will also be that shortcode as well. And just a side note, it does not have to be this randomized shortcode. It can be anything that you want. We can shorten this up, and maybe this is the patient a minor? Since we were just talking about that, you can have this say patient minor or something like that. Just something that you can remember. This will also prevent you from needing to go back to that first page and copy that shortcode into each one that's on the other tabs. If it's something that you can remember, it can make it a lot easier for you, because you can just put that in that name field for each one as you go along and are building out that form. You can change this to something as short as P1 for patient 1 or whatever the case may be. Just know that once you've used a shortcode and you've changed it to something, maybe this is patient address or something. You don't want to just use address, which you absolutely can. Just know that you won't be able to use this specific shortcode again unless you want that information to autofill. So if you were just to put minor, then that minor shortcode won't be able to be used again unless you want it to be used for that autofill functionality. All right. I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat as well. My apologies, I meant to do that a few minutes ago. But the chat is open. If you do have any questions, please feel free to get those in before we wrap up here. Okay. And again, when using the calculation tool, you will just want to make sure to put everything into a set of brackets. I did not harp on that as much as I probably need to. Oftentimes, whenever I see issues with the calculation tool, it's because the client or whoever has been working on the form has been are using the parentheses instead. For this to function in the calculation tool, it will need to be a pair of brackets, and there will always be that placeholder information if there's nothing in this field, so you can see what exactly will need to be done. You can add spaces in between those, the calculation icons. I can't think of the word right now, but the plus sign, minus sign, division, multiplication, whatever the case may be. You don't necessarily need to have spaces in between those and the brackets. You can just run them up right next to each other as I do. You can also add spaces if you like. But again, this will be able to calculate anything, and you will absolutely be able to use any of those selection options to generate that value for that calculation. All right, but it does not look like we have any questions today. That will conclude our video on the selection options or the advanced selection option widgets and what you'll be able to do with them. When using that auto population, one more thing that you will be able to do with these, when using that auto population, you'll also be able to auto populate into a paragraph using those brackets as well. If we were to use both of these brackets, it will output that value into the paragraph widget. So it would be 2 plus 2 based on our selections here, 2 plus 1, 2 plus 2. If we have both selected yes, just know that if you are going to generate an output into a paragraph widget, whatever is set as the value will be that output. So if we were to change these values to something that is text-based instead, you won't then be able to use that with the calculation tool, obviously, but you can have this, say the patient is a minor, or the patient is an adult. The patient does not know. And you could use this for some internal notes or something like that that might be hidden from the patient. But now, depending on what they select, you can have an entire sentence or specific words populate into a paragraph widget. And again, we're just using those shortcodes from each one of these, and we still have these set to numbers for those values. But the patient is a minor, patient is an adult, or the patient does not know. And again, that's going to be done using the value for that selection, and we're going to autofill that shortcode of the question itself into that paragraph. And when using the autofill, you'll always use those brackets. Just remember to use those brackets when using these shortcodes. All right. And as always, once we are finished building out our form, we can move over to the style page, get that live preview again of our form. We can also update any of the styling for this form. If we wanted to update our logo file, it will be your second option in that header section, where you can update any of the other styling as well. Once that's set to where you need, next to publish, and back to account. On the publish page, you'll have an opportunity to update the title or collect any of this other information that you might need from this packet. But once you are ready, that My Account button at the bottom right or the Finish Building, go to My Account button underneath this list. Both will take you back to that Send and Receive page, and you will know that those changes have been saved and published. We can go back to the My Forms page. We can see that we now have 3 forms in this packet, as we had 1 before. We can click on that live link, and it will take us directly to the form, and we can see our brand new form that we've created. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, everybody. That will conclude this video. Just as a reminder, if you would like to keep up with the schedule for our form building videos, or our form building webinars, excuse me, you can always go to My Account, Support, Search Guide. It's going to take you to our product guide. This will be able to answer many questions if you do have any in terms of just using the account, building forms, or setting up integrations. However, you can also keep track of the form building webinar schedule in that FormDr updates section down here at the bottom right. Have the February schedule posted and the March schedule, which we are currently in now. We do have our onboarding schedule here as well. This won't change too much in terms of the information being presented. However, our form building webinars will and you can see the topic of what we'll be talking about for each one of these dates. If there is something that you would like to be in attendance for, or would like to learn about anyway, and or won't be able to be in attendance for that, don't worry, we will be posting all of these as well. You'll be able to click on that posted link, and it will take you right to our YouTube page, and we'll have timestamps at the bottom detailing what we'll be going over for each one of those sections. But again, that will be found by going to My Account, Support, Search Guide, FormDr Updates. All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Hope you all have a great afternoon, and hope to see you again next time. Our next video will be, our next form building webinar will be on next Tuesday, and we will be doing our onboarding videos on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. So hope to see you all there. These are all free. If you do have any coworkers or staff that you would like to learn this information as well, please feel free to send them our way. We do encourage everybody to join as often as they would like to. So thank you again, and have a great afternoon.